The Vrethkai had ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years. They were tall creatures with gray skin and 6 eyes that glowed with cold purple light. They had no need for armies or weapons of war. They had something far more powerful. They had fear itself. The Vrethkai were psychic predators. They could reach into the minds of other beings and fill them with terror. Not ordinary fear, but the kind of fear that breaks the soul. The kind that makes a creature forget how to fight. The kind that makes entire worlds surrender without a single shot being fired. This was how they built their empire. They called it the hegemony. Thousands of worlds, billions of slaves, all controlled by one simple truth. The Vrethkai could make you feel fear so deep that death seemed like a mercy. 40 years ago, they came to Earth. Humanity had just begun to explore the stars. They had found a few colony worlds. They thought they were alone in the universe. They were wrong. The Vrethkai arrived with their terror ships. They broadcast their dread waves across the planet. Millions of humans collapsed. Some went mad. Some simply stopped breathing. The governments of Earth surrendered in 3 days. Now humans were just another slave race in the hegemony. They worked in mines. They built ships for their masters. They kept their heads down and tried to survive. The Vrethkai considered them broken, just like everyone else. On the mining colony of Kepler 447c, life was hard but predictable. Humans worked alongside other alien species. They dug precious metals from the red soil. They lived in gray buildings under a gray sky. They did not complain. Complaining invited attention from the overseers. Commander Elias Vance was the human military liaison on Kepler 447c. He was a tall man with gray hair and tired eyes. He had fought in the resistance during the invasion of Earth. He had watched his wife die in his arms when the dread waves hit. He had surrendered with everyone else, but Elias had not given up. He had simply learned to wait. For 20 years, he had built a secret network. Human survivors who remembered what it meant to fight. Engineers who knew how to make weapons from mining equipment. Doctors who could treat wounds without asking questions. They waited in silence. They planned in darkness. They knew that one day the moment would come. The Vrethkai overseer of Kepler 447c was named Patriarch Kethvorin. He was ancient, even by Vrethkai standards. His gray skin had turned almost white with age. His 6 eyes burned with cruel intelligence. He ruled the colony through regular terror broadcasts. Once every month, Kethvorin would climb to the top of his black tower. He would open his mind and send out a wave of pure terror. Every being on the colony would feel it. They would fall to their knees. They would remember that they were slaves. They would remember that resistance was impossible. This was how things had always been. This was how things would always be. Or so Kethvorin believed. Mira Chen was 7 years old. She had brown eyes and black hair that her mother tied in 2 braids. She smiled easily and laughed often, even in the gray misery of the mining colony. She was too young to remember Earth. Kepler 447c was the only home she had ever known. But Mira loved stories. Her grandmother had told her tales of Earth before the invasion. Stories of heroes who fought against impossible odds. Stories of ordinary people who did extraordinary things. Stories of a time when humans were free. Mira started sharing these stories with other children. She told them about soldiers who held the line at a place called Thermopylae. She told them about slaves who escaped to freedom through something called the Underground Railroad. She told them about a wall that fell in a city called Berlin because people refused to be divided. The children listened with wide eyes. They had never heard such things. In the hegemony, stories of resistance were forbidden. Hope was illegal. The Vrethkai understood that ideas were more dangerous than weapons. Someone reported Mira to the overseers, a fellow human hoping to earn favor. The Vrethkai guards came for her at night. They dragged her from her bed while their parents screamed and begged. Patriarch Kethvoran decided to make an example. He announced a public gathering in the central square. Attendance was mandatory for all humans. The other alien species could watch if they wished. The square was silent when Kethvoran's guards brought Mira forward. She was so small. Her hands were bound with metal cables. Her face was dirty with tears. But she did not cry anymore. She stood straight and looked out at the crowd with something that confused the Vrethkai. She was afraid. Of course she was afraid. But there was something else in her eyes. Something like defiance. Something like pride. Kethvoran spoke, his voice echoing across the square. He spoke of the crime of spreading dangerous ideas. He spoke of the punishment for those who forgot their place. He spoke of the mercy of the hegemony, which could have destroyed humanity, but chose to let them serve. Then he killed her. A single psychic blast that stopped her heart. Quick, clean, efficient. Mira Chen fell to the ground like a broken doll. She was 7 years old. Kethvoran waited for the reaction he expected. The wailing, the despair, the complete submission that always followed such demonstrations. He had done this 1,000 times on 100 worlds. He knew exactly what would happen. But something strange occurred. Something that had never happened in the 10,000-year history of the hegemony. The humans did not wail. They did not despair. They did not submit. They went quiet. Kethvoran watched as every human in the square lowered their heads. Not in defeat, in something else, something he did not recognize. He looked out at the crowd and saw 2,000 humans standing in perfect silence, not moving, not speaking, barely breathing. He reached out with his psychic senses, trying to taste their fear. He found it. The fear was there, but it was not the fear he knew. It was not the fear that broke minds and bent wills. It was something different, something cold, something patient, something that felt, for the first time in his ancient life, dangerous. In the crowd, Elias Vance raised his head. His eyes met those of Mira's father. No words were exchanged, just a nod, just an understanding. The moment had come, and the Vrethkai, masters of fear for 10,000 years, were about to learn what humanity did when they were truly afraid. They fought back. The silence lasted for 3 days. The Vrethkai did not understand it. In their 10,000 years of conquest, they had seen every reaction to their terror. They had seen species go mad with fear. They had seen entire civilizations collapse into despair. They had seen proud warriors reduced to weeping children. But they had never seen silence like this. The humans of Kepler 447c went about their work. They showed up to the mines on time. They met their quotas. They followed every rule. They spoke when spoken to. They did nothing wrong. But they did not speak to each other, not out loud. They communicated in glances, in small gestures, in the touch of a hand on a shoulder. The Vrethkai guards watched them constantly, but found nothing to punish. The other alien species on the colony watched the humans with growing unease. The Kralith, a species of insect-like creatures, had been slaves for 800 years. This was not submission. "What are they doing?" asked one young Kralith to an elder. The elder watched a group of human miners walk past in perfect silence. Their faces showed nothing. Their eyes showed everything. "I do not know," the elder whispered, "but I think we should stay far away from them." Patriarch Kethvoran summoned his advisors to his black tower. He sat on his throne of polished obsidian and demanded answers. His advisors had none to give. "They are planning something," said one advisor. "We should execute more of them." "No," said another, "that will only make it worse, whatever this is." Kethvoran silenced them with a wave of his hand. He reached out with his psychic senses, probing the human quarter of the colony. He felt their minds like distant flames. Fear was there. It was always there. But something was changing. The fear was becoming structured, organized. It was transforming into something else, something he could not name. He decided to reassert control. He would broadcast another dread wave, a powerful one. He would remind the humans of their place in the universe. He would break this strange silence and return things to normal. That night, Kethvaron climbed to the top of his tower. He opened his ancient mind and gathered his psychic power. 10,000 years of conquest had made him strong. He had broken 100 species. He would break this one too. He released the dread wave. It rolled across the colony like an invisible tsunami. The Kraleth fell to the ground, chittering in terror. The Vorn, massive creatures used for heavy labor, collapsed and whimpered. Every alien species on Kepler 447c experienced the wave exactly as expected. The humans did not. Kethvaron felt his attack hit the human minds. He felt their fear spike. He felt them tremble. And then, for the first time in his 10,000-year life, he felt something push back. 2,000 human minds, united by grief and rage, rejected his power. They did not just resist it, they reflected it. The dread wave bounced back at him like light off a mirror. Kethvaron screamed. Purple blood burst from his eyes, his nose, his mouth. He fell from his throne and crashed to the floor. His advisors rushed to help him, but he was already unconscious. Across the colony, the humans raised their heads. They felt the psychic attack fail. They felt the patriarch fall, and for the first time in 3 days, they smiled. In the underground tunnels beneath the mining complex, Elias Vance met with his lieutenants. The room was small and dark. A single lamp provided light. Maps covered the walls. Weapons made from mining tools were stacked in the corners. "It worked," said Vance. His voice was calm, but his eyes were bright. "The old monster felt what happens when you push us too far." "How did we do that?" asked Maria Santos, his second-in-command. "We're not psychic. We can't fight them on that level." Vance shook his head. "It's not about being psychic. It's about understanding what we are. The Vrethkai think fear is a weapon that only works in one direction. They're wrong." He pulled up a map of the colony on a battered screen. "For 40 years I've studied them. I've read everything we could find about their psychology. They don't understand us because they can't imagine what we are." "And what are we?" asked Maria. "We're the species that invented horror stories for entertainment," said Vance. "We're the species that builds roller coasters and haunted houses. We're the species that watches scary movies for fun. Fear isn't our master. It's our old friend. We know it better than any species in the galaxy." He pointed to the map. "The Vrethkai use fear to control, to paralyze. But for us, fear is a signal. It tells us something important is happening. It tells us to pay attention. And when our children are threatened, it tells us to fight." That night, messages spread through the human underground network. Not words, just 3 phrases, repeated over and over. "Remember the Alamo. Remember Warsaw. Remember Mira." The other alien species intercepted some of these messages. They did not understand them, but they understood that something had changed. The Kraleth Elder had been right. Something dangerous was waking up. Vance visited the Chen family. Mira's parents sat in their small apartment, surrounded by their daughter's belongings. Her toys, her drawings, a small book of Earth stories that her grandmother had written from memory. Vance did not speak. He simply stood in the doorway and bowed his head. Mira's father looked up. His eyes were red from crying, but there was something else in them now. The same thing that was spreading through every human on the colony. He nodded once, just once. It was enough. Patriarch Kethvorin woke 3 days later, in the medical wing of his tower. His advisors told him what had happened. He did not believe them. He could not believe them. No species had ever reflected a dread wave. It was impossible. He demanded to try again. His advisors begged him to wait. He ignored them. He climbed to the top of his tower on shaking legs. He gathered his power, even weaker than before. He sent out another wave, smaller this time. A test. The humans reflected it again. This time, the feedback was not just pain. It carried something else. Images, memories, human memories. Kethvorin saw a little girl holding a book. He saw her eyes, full of defiance. He heard a word echo through his mind, spoken by 2,000 voices at once. The word was no. For the first time in 10,000 years, Patriarch Kethvorin felt something he had never felt before. Not from outside, but from within his own ancient heart. He felt afraid. And in the tunnels beneath the colony, Elias Vance smiled grimly and spoke to his people. They finally understand. They poked a sleeping giant, and now that giant is awake. The revolution was about to begin. The Hegemony High Command received the report from Kepler 447c with disbelief. A species had reflected a dread wave. This had never happened. It could not happen. The very idea challenged everything the Vrethkai believed about themselves and the universe. Grand Patriarch Sethmora, ruler of the entire hegemony, summoned his scholars and scientists. He demanded an explanation. His advisors brought him everything they could find about humans. What they found disturbed them deeply. The first scholar spoke with a trembling voice. Great One, the humans have a strange relationship with fear. They do not simply experience it, they seek it out. Zethmora's 6 eyes narrowed. Explain. The scholar activated a display showing human media from before the invasion. Movies, books, video games. They create stories specifically designed to frighten themselves. They call it horror. They watch these stories for pleasure. It is worse than that, Great One. They build machines designed to simulate danger. They call them roller coasters. Humans pay money to be terrified. Zethmora sat in silence. This made no sense. Fear was a weapon. Fear was control. Why would any species deliberately frighten itself? A third scholar bowed low. Great One, I have found something even more troubling. The humans have a concept we have never encountered. They call it righteous anger. Anger is common, said Zethmora. Many species feel anger. Not like this, said the scholar. For most species, fear and anger are opposites. Fear weakens, anger clouds judgment. But humans can transform fear into anger, and this anger makes them stronger, more focused, more dangerous. He showed images from human history. Soldiers charging into certain death. Mothers lifting vehicles to save their children. Ordinary people standing against tyranny with nothing but their bare hands. When humans feel fear for something they love, they do not run. They do not freeze. They attack. The greater the threat, the more dangerous they become. Zethmora stared at the images. He saw humans throughout their history fighting impossible battles. He saw them lose. He saw them die. And he saw them keep fighting anyway. Why, he whispered. Why do they not submit? The scholar shook his head. We do not know, Great One, but there is one more thing, the most dangerous thing. He showed an image of a small girl with brown eyes and black hair, Mira Chen. When you threaten their young, something happens to humans, something we have no word for. Their fear becomes absolute, and then it transforms into something that cannot be stopped. On Kepler 447c, the uprising began. Elias Vance had planned for this moment for 20 years. Every human in the colony knew their role. They moved with precision, striking targets all across the complex at the same moment. The Vrethkai guards expected resistance to come with screaming and chaos. Instead, the humans came in silence. They emerged from tunnels and buildings with mining tools converted into weapons. Pickaxes, drilling equipment, explosive charges used for blasting rock. The guards sent out dread waves. The humans walked through them. A young Vrethkai officer watched in horror as a human woman advanced toward him. His psychic attack hit her full force. She stumbled, her face twisted in terror. But she did not stop. She kept walking, step by step, until she was close enough to swing her improvised weapon. "Why?" the officer screamed. "Why are you not afraid?" The woman's eyes were wet with tears. Her hands were shaking. "I am afraid," she said. "I am terrified. But my daughter is watching from somewhere, and I will not let her see me run." The officer did not survive to report her answer. The other alien species on the colony watched in shock. The Kraleth hid in their barracks, chittering anxiously. The Vorn pressed themselves against walls, trying to be invisible. They had never seen anything like this. No species fought the Vrethkai. It was impossible. It was suicide. But the humans kept coming. In his damaged tower, Patriarch Kethvoron tried desperately to coordinate his forces, but his psychic network was disrupted. The reflected dread waves had damaged something in his mind. He could not connect with his officers the way he used to. He watched on security monitors as the humans swept through the colony. They were not military. They were miners, engineers, doctors. But they fought with a ferocity that his guards could not match. "Send for reinforcements," he ordered. "Contact the sector fleet." "We cannot," said his communication officer. "The humans have destroyed the relay station." Kethvoran felt something cold settle in his chest. He was alone. He was surrounded. And for the first time since he was a child, he did not know what to do. Elias Vance led the assault on the central tower. His forces had secured most of the colony. Only Kethvoran remained. The old patriarch had retreated to his throne room with his remaining guards. Vance stood before the massive doors of the tower. He spoke into a communicator, knowing that Kethvoran would hear. "Patriarch, this is Commander Elias Vance of the Human Resistance. Your forces have fallen. Your communications are cut. You have two choices: surrender and face justice for your crimes, or die in that tower." There was a long silence. Then Kethvoran's voice came through, dripping with contempt. "You cannot defeat us, human. Even if you take this colony, the hegemony will crush you. You have merely hastened your extinction." Vance smiled grimly. "Maybe, but here is something you should know before you make your choice." He paused, then spoke the words that would be remembered throughout the galaxy. "You controlled the galaxy by spreading fear. You thought fear was your weapon and yours alone. But you made a mistake. You killed a child, our child. And now you will learn what humans do when we are truly afraid." He looked up at the tower, his eyes hard. "We do not submit. We do not beg. We do not break. We fight. And we do not stop until the threat to our children is destroyed. You can kill us. You can kill all of us. But as long as one human remains alive, we will keep coming." He raised his weapon. "So here is my answer to 10,000 years of your terror. We are afraid. But we do not fear what you fear. We fear only that which threatens our children. And we will fight you until the end. And that is exactly why you should be afraid of us." The assault on the tower began. And across the galaxy, other human colonies received word of what was happening on Kepler 447c. The underground networks activated. The waiting was over. The war for humanity's freedom had begun. The news spread across the hegemony like wildfire. A human colony had risen. They had defeated the Vrethkai garrison. They had captured a patriarch. For most species in the hegemony, this was impossible. The Vrethkai were masters. They could not be defeated. The very idea was madness. But the humans proved that madness could become reality. Within 1 week, 12 more human colonies rose in rebellion. Within 1 month, the number reached 50. The underground network that Elias Vance had helped build was larger than anyone knew. It spanned hundreds of worlds. It included millions of humans who had waited decades for this moment. Grand Patriarch Zethmora responded with overwhelming force. He sent his terror fleets to crush the rebellion. These were the most powerful weapons in the hegemony. Ships that could broadcast dread waves across entire star systems. Ships that could drive whole populations to suicidal despair. The first terror fleet arrived at the Kepler system expecting easy victory. They activated their psychic weapons. They broadcast the dread wave at maximum power. The humans did not fall. Instead, they responded with a weapon of their own. They told stories. From every human ship, every colony, every station, broadcasts went out. Not threats, not weapons. Stories. Human stories. Tales of courage from Earth's history. They told the story of 300 Spartans who held a mountain pass against 1 million enemies. They told the story of a woman named Harriet who led slaves to freedom through darkness and danger. They told the story of young people who stood before tanks in a place called Tiananmen Square. They told the story of Mira Chen, a 7-year-old girl who died for sharing stories of hope. The Vrethkai commanders did not understand. What kind of weapon was a story? How could words fight dread waves? They found out. The stories spread beyond human ships. Other species heard them. The Kraleth, the Vorn, a dozen other races that had been slaves for generations. They heard tales of beings who faced impossible odds and refused to surrender. And something stirred inside them, something that the Vrethkai had suppressed for centuries, something called hope. On the slave world of Kethrix, a Kraleth elder stood before his people. He had heard the human stories. He had learned about the little girl who died for words. Now he spoke his own words for the first time in 800 years. The humans fight, he said. They are afraid, but they fight. If they can do this, why cannot we? The Kraleth rose that day. Their claws were not made for weapons. Their bodies were fragile compared to the Vrethkai. But they rose anyway. On the factory world of Vorn and Prime, the massive Vorn workers put down their tools. They had been building ships for their masters for generations. Now they refused. The Vrethkai tried to force them with dread waves. The Vorn had learned from the humans. They walked through the fear. They kept walking until they reached the overseers. The Vrethkai had never been challenged by the Vorn. They were too big to be controlled by simple fear. They had been controlled by hopelessness instead. Now hopelessness was dying across the galaxy. Grand Patriarch Zethmora watched his empire begin to crumble. He called an emergency meeting of all surviving patriarchs. Only half of them answered. The others were dead, captured, or hiding. How is this happening? Zethmora demanded. We have ruled for 10,000 years. How can primitives challenge us? An advisor stepped forward. Great One, we have studied the human transmissions, their stories, their history. We believe we understand now. Then explain. The humans have something we never developed. They call it collective memory. They remember their history. They pass it down through generations. Every human child learns about those who came before them, those who fought, those who died, those who refused to give up. He paused. When the girl died, she became part of that memory. She joined the others. The humans do not fight alone. They fight with the weight of their entire history behind them. Zethmora felt cold. How do we counter this? We cannot, Great One. We have no such history. We have always been the hunters, never the hunted. We have no stories of overcoming impossible odds, because we have never faced impossible odds. He lowered his head. Until now. Elias Vance stood on the bridge of the human flagship Liberty. It was a converted mining vessel, held together by hope and improvised repairs. But it was his, and it flew the flag of free humanity. Around him, a fleet of human and allied ships prepared for battle. Kralath cruisers flew alongside Vorn heavy carriers. Vessels from a dozen species that had never worked together now fought as one. Vance addressed them all. Friends, allies, brothers and sisters in chains no more. Today we face the Vrethkai home fleet. They are stronger than us. They are more numerous. They have 10,000 years of conquest behind them. He paused and smiled. But we have something they never understood. We have each other. We have our stories. And we have the memory of a little girl who died because she dared to speak of freedom. He raised his fist. They taught the galaxy to be afraid. Now we teach the galaxy what fear really is. It is not weakness. It is not surrender. It is the fire that drives us forward. The courage that comes when everything is at stake. Human voices mixed with alien ones. Species that had never spoken now shared a common purpose. Today we fight, Vance continued. Some of us will die. But those who come after will remember us, just as we remember all who came before. That is our true weapon. That is what they cannot defeat. He turned to face the stars. All ships moved to engage, for freedom, for the future, for Mira. The Allied fleet surged forward. The greatest battle in galactic history was about to begin. And on the Vrethkai homeworld, Grand Patriarch Zethmora made a decision. If he could not win through ordinary means, he would use extraordinary ones. He ordered the activation of the Eternal Scream, a weapon so terrible that it had only been used once in Vrethkai history. It was designed to permanently destroy the minds of any species exposed to it. One blast would reduce humanity to mindless husks. One blast would end the rebellion forever. Zethmora watched as the weapon powered up. He aimed it at the heart of human space. He aimed it at Earth. He did not know that in doing so, he was making the greatest mistake in the history of the universe. The Eternal Scream, activated at midnight, Earth time. Grand Patriarch Zethmora had aimed the ancient weapon at humanity's homeworld. From there, the psychic blast would spread through the network of human minds across the galaxy. Every human, no matter where they were, would feel its effects. The weapon had been used only once before, against a species called the Mendari, who had also dared to resist. The Mendari no longer existed. Their entire civilization had been reduced to mindless shells that died within days. Zethmora expected the same result. He was wrong. The Eternal Scream hit Earth first. 8 billion humans felt it simultaneously. The psychic assault was beyond anything the Vrethkai had ever deployed. It did not simply cause fear. It attacked the very essence of consciousness. It tried to tear apart the connections between memory and identity. Across the galaxy, humans collapsed. On ships, in colonies, on the front lines of battle, they fell where they stood. Their eyes went blank. Their bodies went limp. Zethmora watched the results on his monitors. He saw human fleets go dark. He saw human colonies fall silent. He allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The rebellion was over. The natural order was restored. Then something impossible happened. The humans started getting back up. On Earth, a woman named Maria opened her eyes. She had felt the scream tear through her mind. She had felt it try to destroy everything she was. But something else had happened. Something the Vrethkai had not expected. The scream had connected every human mind together. For one terrible moment, 8 billion people had shared consciousness. They had experienced each other's memories, their histories, their traumas, their loves, their losses, and they had experienced something else. the weight of human history itself. Maria felt it all, the suffering of every ancestor who had ever lived, the struggles, the wars, the genocides, the darkness that humanity had faced again and again throughout its existence. She felt the Holocaust. She felt the slave ships. She felt the trenches of World War I. She felt every moment of pain that her species had ever known. It should have destroyed her. That was what the scream was designed to do. No mind could bear the weight of so much suffering. But Maria was human, and humans had evolved to carry exactly this burden. They had developed the ability to feel trauma and transform it, to take pain and turn it into purpose, to remember the darkest moments of history and use those memories as fuel for a better future. The eternal scream had tried to destroy humanity with suffering. Instead, it had reminded them of every reason they had to fight. Maria stood up. Around her, other humans rose as well. Their eyes were wet with tears. Their faces were marked by grief. But they were not broken. They were unified in a way that had never happened before. And the psychic link was still open. Zethmora felt the change through the eternal scream's sensors. He saw the human minds reconnecting. He saw them pushing back against the weapon's assault. And then he felt something that made his ancient heart stop. The feedback loop reversed. The eternal scream had connected the Vrethkai network to the human collective consciousness. Now all of humanity's memories flowed backward through that connection. The weight of human history poured into Vrethkai minds across the galaxy. Zethmora experienced the Middle Passage. He felt what it was like to be chained in the darkness of a slave ship for weeks. He experienced Auschwitz. He stood in gas chambers and felt the panic of millions. He experienced the atomic bomb falling on Hiroshima. He felt flesh burn and bones melt. But he also felt something else. He felt humans surviving these horrors. He felt them rebuilding after every catastrophe. He felt their stubborn, impossible refusal to give up. He felt hope. It was too much for a Vrethkai mind. They had evolved as predators, not survivors. They had no defense against the weight of human resilience. Zethmora screamed as his consciousness collapsed under the pressure of 8 billion minds, united by shared trauma and shared determination. Across the hegemony, every Vrethkai connected to the psychic network experienced the same thing. Their minds shattered. Their empire fell in minutes. When it was over, the galaxy was silent. Elias Vance and the Allied fleet found the Vrethkai homeworld in ruins. Not physical ruins, the buildings still stood. The ship still orbited. But the Vrethkai themselves were broken. They wandered their streets in confusion, their psychic powers gone, their memories fractured. They had spent 10,000 years wielding fear as a weapon. They had never learned to survive it. Vance walked through the ruins of the Grand Patriarch's palace. He found Zethmora in his throne room, huddled in a corner. The ancient ruler looked up at the human with 6 dim eyes. "What are you?" Zethmora whispered. "What kind of monsters are you?" Vance looked down at him. "We are not monsters. We are survivors. Our history is full of darkness, suffering, cruelty, things that would drive any other species to extinction." He knelt beside the broken patriarch. "But we kept going. We took the worst things in the universe, and we learned from them. We remembered them so we could be better. That memory is our greatest strength." He stood up and walked toward the door. "You tried to break us with fear. But fear is our oldest companion. We have faced it every day of our existence. We do not run from it. We walk with it. You should have left that little girl alone." 1 year later, a ceremony was held on Kepler 447c. The mining colony had been transformed. Gardens grew where barracks once stood. Schools had replaced prisons. The gray sky remained, but the people beneath it had changed. Representatives from 100 species gathered in the central square. Kraleth stood beside Vorn. Former enemies stood as friends. They had all learned the same lesson. Hope was stronger than fear. In the center of the square stood a statue. It showed a small girl with brown eyes and black hair, holding a book in her hands. She was smiling. The plaque beneath her read, Mira Chen, age 7. She died for sharing stories of courage. The galaxy listened. Elias Vance stood before the statue. He was older now. His hair was white. His body was tired, but his eyes were at peace. Beside him stood Mora's parents. They had survived the rebellion. They had seen their daughter become a symbol for billions. Their grief had not ended. It never would. But it had been joined by something else. Pride. Vance addressed the gathering. We did not win this war with weapons. We won it with stories, with memories, with the simple truth that fear does not have to break us. It can build us. He looked at the statue. A little girl died because she told stories about heroes. Today, she is the greatest hero of all, not because she was strong, not because she was brave, but because she reminded us of who we really are. He raised his head to the sky. We are humans. We carry the weight of our history. We remember the darkness, and we keep walking toward the light. The crowd was silent for a moment. Then, slowly, they began to speak. Different languages, different voices, but the same words. For Mira. The words spread across the square, across the colony, across the planet, across the galaxy. And somewhere, in the place where spirits watch over those they love, a little girl with brown eyes smiled. Her story had changed the universe.